Hey there, I am Barb Higgins, and this is 1,000 Tiny Steps. In this podcast, I share my stories of love, loss, triumph, and tragedy as I continue to retrace my steps and ponder what led to the death of my daughter Molly. By doing so, I hope to not only help myself, but to bring purpose and possibility to those who listen. If you are ready to laugh, cry, shake your head in disbelief, then tie, buckle, face up, or slip on your shoes and join me as we begin our 1,000 Tiny Steps.
Hey everyone, Barb Higgins here, welcoming you to episode 166 of 1,000 Tiny Steps. So my dad just died. It's been 8 days now. So for the last 8 days, I've done nothing except minister to my family, which when I'm not aggravated as all heck, is actually a really humbling and honoring thing to be able to do. I know that our phones and everything follow us and listen to us. You know, you mentioned cat food, pretty soon you have cat food ads on your Facebook feed. But I kept getting this meme called, "What is a parentified child?" And so I sort of always relate to that meme because I'm a parentified child. I was the sibling that always helped. I was the babysitter. I helped my mother clean or cook or whatever. If something had to be bought at the store, I'm typically the one that went. And there was a time in my life where I really resented this. And when I look at the mental health implications as to why children become parentified like this, I can I can feel pretty bad about this current state. Having said that, I think that along with all of the dynamics of family, and for me, my family was your traditional 1960s and 70s family. Husband, wife, kids, house, neighborhood, school, 2 weeks a year vacation, your classic, really baby boomer generation family. Gen X is when women started to work and that sort of thing. But I do know that a lot of the upheaval in my family stemmed from lies that we were told about ourselves, lies that women were told, which was a couple of weeks ago, lies that about things we learned in education, lies that we were told as kids by our parents, and just the idea that the way to control a population is to sell in a story that keeps it in place. So I had a lot of ideas on what to do next. And when my dad died, I realized that all I could think about was my dad. And so those of you that have listened to my whole podcast and know my story know that my relationship with my father is complex. He was my child abuser and spent the rest of his life trying to make up for the fact that he did a really terrible thing. I know it makes my mother uncomfortable when I talk candidly about this stuff. She never got to talk about her abusers. Different generation, you kept that stuff quiet. And that goes back to what a little girl is supposed to be like, quiet. Little girls should be seen and not heard. I'm going to talk today about lies that boys are told and lies that boys and men have been taught need to be true about themselves. And when I look at the upheaval right now around gender and gender identity, I don't think it has anything to do with your body, what your body parts are. It's what having those body parts tell society you're supposed to do. And I think we could solve a lot of problems if we just realize that your body parts only indicate your physical reality, penis, vagina, whatever. That's what your body is. I grew up as a little girl who was not at all sold on the idea that because I was a girl, I was expected to do certain things and act a certain way. That's always been an issue with me. I would generate a lot of those conversations in my health classes around how does society treat us differently. So lies that boys were told will be sort of the theme of this. And I'm going to start with lies that my dad grew up believing because he had a very, very troubling childhood. Now, he had parents that fed him and kept him clothed and gave him opportunities, took him to church, sent him to school, encouraged good grades, made him a healthy lunch, encouraged him in sports, probably to a negative degree. So from the outside, he looked like your really average American boy, but he had very, very absent emotionally. His mother was very absent emotionally. Looking back on her now, I'm willing to bet she was extremely undiagnosed, bipolar, or severely depressed. She was not right. And I say this with all the love in my heart. She didn't understand affection. She wasn't a snuggler. She followed a schedule. She was like a drill sergeant, so to speak. And my grandfather was a military vet and a postman. And I don't know what made him fall in love with Gladys, my grandmother, but he did. And as parents, they were woefully short on comfort and love and reassurance from my father. He grew up always feeling like he didn't measure up, that he wasn't good enough, that he wasn't smart enough. At the same time, anytime he failed, it was either a foolish mistake he made, aside from the failure or the fault of my mother. When I listened to stories of my dad as the high school athlete and middle school athlete that he was, and the kind of human being he was to people, and the kind of teammate he was everything I would want Gracie, Molly, and Jack to be. At his memorial service, the stories from people that knew him way back when were tear jerkers. My mother's friends and the friends that they hung out with as couples loved my dad. He was soft-spoken, he was funny, he was articulate. He was always inclusive and kind. He did so many things publicly that were everything he thought a wonderful person would be. It's made me, knowing the other side of him, the angry, dark, unhealed, broken side that could abuse his own child. It's a conflict, and I've always taken it upon me and made it my responsibility to keep that secret. And in that culture, 3 generations ago, when girls and women got sexually assaulted, the blame was almost immediately laid upon the girl. I was on a Facebook page today and there was an abortion comment. It was very misogynistic. So I just put that the quote made me sick. And this guy commented about keep your legs together and you won't get pregnant. Like my spreading my legs is the reason the guy would somehow him deciding to fuck me has nothing to do with me getting pregnant. It was just awful. And so I, retaliated, and Facebook wouldn't let my post. They took it down because it was hateful, although his leg spreading comment was not. And what this made me sort of put a lump in my throat, because it made me realize that in many ways, nothing has changed. Women are asked, what do you use for birth control when they go for their physicals? Why are men asked that? So what do you use for birth control? You married, you have a girlfriend? What do you do for birth control? We don't assign any responsibility to men. So my dad grew up in a family that absolutely put men above women. My grandmother made it clear that it was a woman's job to take care of them. Now, she put my brother Ricky on a pedestal, a huge pedestal, and nothing he could do was wrong. And every fault he had was because my mother was his mother. She put Norm, my dad, on the same pedestal, but she also berated him and belittled him and insulted him and made him feel terrible about himself. I know that he was desperately afraid of his parents and sought their approval all the time. So one of the first lies that my dad grew up with was that he was unlovable. And he came to believe this because the strongest emotion his parents gave him was anger and punishment. So how do you love somebody that does something wrong and is punishable? He wasn't often listened to. My mom shared a story about he was being bullied and his father made him go back outside and finish it off, meaning go beat the crap out of this guy. And my dad didn't want to beat him up. He just didn't want anything to do with all of that. My dad grew up thinking that he should be better than my mother. But that was a tricky one because it was also his job to make enough money to support a family. And he worked for the state of New Hampshire and he had a wonderful job, but he didn't make enough to support his family. We were broke all the time. And so when my mother went to work, he was called a failure by his parents. What kind of husband are you that your wife has to go to work? And the second part was be a man, forbid her from going to work. And I overheard some of these fights. And I know that my dad grew up under immense pressure to be the best athlete, which fortunately for him, he was incredibly gifted and talented. He still holds the school record at Concord High School. And for any basketball fans, former San Antonio Spurs player Matt Bonner graduated from Concord High School, and he holds every basketball record with the exception of one of my dad's, a rebound record. He was an amazing athlete, the first high school boy to dunk a basketball. So I believe all of these things athletically saved him. I know that he spent his adult life feeling like a failure because he was supposed to pitch for the Red Sox and he was supposed to play basketball professionally. He was a good enough athlete to do either of these sports at a professional level. He had a shoulder injury that I don't know the details of, but I know it derailed his baseball career. And he went to college on a scholarship, basketball scholarship at UNH. But after 2 years, just realized that having a wife, my mother, and a baby, and then Ricky, and then his senior year, a new baby, me, was too much to be in college and play basketball and travel and raise a family. So I have to believe a part of him also had anger and resentment at my mother, because if it weren't for her getting pregnant, he could have done all these things. He was accepted, some preliminary acceptance into the Air Force, and he did not want to go. And I believe there was a couple of things that kept him from the Air Force, one of which was my mother and my brother Rick. So my dad grew up in a generation that said men are the head of the household, men make the money, men make the decisions. It is the woman in your life's job to care for you, to cook for you and do your laundry and greet you at the door looking pretty with a drink in her hand so that you can just sit and relax after your long, hard day. While she had spent the entire day cleaning and cooking and laundry, and if there are children, caring for the children. So part of this belief system derailed women into thinking all of these things were subservient level tasks. American culture tells us that women who stay home and raise their kids are failures. Raising a child is the greatest gift. Now that I've lost a child, I'm sorry, I think being a mother is a pretty fucking awesome thing. But it isn't valued through the patriarchal view as valuable. It's a task that is left to the women so the men can go out and succeed. So these are all just lies and beliefs that are untrue. They're not black and white. And I know that my father, in his adult life, after he found the Baha'i faith and after he quit drinking and after he really understood that humanity is like a bird and each wing is one is male and one is female. And whatever ideation of sexual identity or gender identity you are, the wings must be equal. It can't be all men or all women. There has to be an equal balance for humanity to work. And I often think back to a conversation I had with Molly before she died about genetically engineering perfect babies. And I said, when you interfere with nature, when you mess up with nature, things go drastically wrong, that some of the variability in nature is what keeps the human species strong. Can't get too specific or it stops working. That's physically speaking, I think. I know that emotionally and mentally and societally, socially, psychologically, there has to be equality and equitable treatment and behavior and respect. And my dad grew up in a time where there wasn't. I know that he felt like a failure much of the time. I remember arguments and fights my parents had. I know he was afraid to die because I think he felt that he let God down. He let his parents down by not becoming a great athlete. He let all of his fans down. Now, very typical small town. His 82-year-old friends talk about their high school games with such clarity of memory that sometimes high school sports is big enough. And it's really what 90% of athletes get is high school sports. I know that my brother Rick had incredible pressure. He was the firstborn. He was the son. He was an athlete. He needs to succeed. I know that I was often envious of the attention my dad gave Rick around his sports, arguments and conversations and just everything around Ricky's hockey game. Did he play well? Did he not play well? And I remember when I started running, my dad didn't say anything to me. And I'm like, don't you care? Don't you have any coaching for me? And he was honest. I don't know anything about running. And then most of the advice he gave me didn't have anything to do with running. It had to do with sportsmanship in the bigger picture, which was ultimately the best advice. I do know that a part of my success in going to college for free solidified him in his success in raising me, even though I did all those things in spite of him raising me, or despite him raising me, whatever the proper grammar is. Biologically speaking, I get my running ability somewhere else. But a lot of my mental tenacity and how I look at things, I got from my dad. I hold one school record. Rachel Umberger holds 5. My record is one that she didn't break. That's a Higgins thing. So looking at lies that boys are told, and I look at what society expects of boys, I'll go back a bit to last week when I shared a high school health lesson. An amazing conversation with my editor who always looks at things through different lenses. And he was sort of amused by the heterosexuality of my lesson and the realities of sort of stereotyping boys and girls into these spheres. And I had to, be clear that I was going on answers I was given. I wasn't assigning a stereotype to anybody. I asked a question and the answers came back the way they came back. And I remember feeling a bit disheartened that all these years later, in the very high school my dad went to, I was teaching, boys still felt they had to be big and strong and powerful, and girls still felt they had to be little and demure and quiet. Guys could sleep around and be heroes. If girls slept around, they're sluts. Like so much had not changed. And I look at our current reality around all of this, and I think it's worse for girls. I think female stereotypes are blasted now socially. So what would my dad think of all this? I don't know. So I did a typical sort of Google I just basically typed in lies told to boys. So one of them was, let the women come to you. So this goes against everything I was raised as, where you never, ever asked a boy out. The boy asked you out. So I found that to be interesting because nobody would come to anybody. I was always told this, always tell the truth. If you tell the truth, you won't get in trouble. And then you get your butt beat because you told the truth. Girls play hard to get. You have to be pushy. Okay, so this could be a very common misnomer given to guys. Like a girl saying no means she really likes you. But I think that plays into if a guy's picking on you, it's because he likes you. If he's being told that her smacking you and turning around means she's playing hard to get, then you keep pushing and bullying. Girls don't play hard to get. I think when a girl likes a boy, she tells the boy she likes them. And I'm going along what I say. And I realize this is boy girl. I know that relationships are varied. I'm talking about my dad, and I'm talking about in a binary way, which is the basis of reality we base society on, which is now being challenged, which is a good thing. Boys and girls are told very different things. Real men don't cry. This comes up again and again and again. When I was about 7 or 8, maybe 10, we were watching a movie called Death Be Not Proud. And it was about a little boy who dies of a brain tumor. A little boy, he's probably in college, so 18 or 19. And it was just the whole story of when he's first diagnosed. Robbie Benson played the part. And we watched it, my mother, me, Rick, and if Jonathan and Johanna were born, yeah, they were up in Benson. And my mom and I were sobbing at the end of the movie. And I remember Rick and my dad laughing at us. And I was so angry. I stormed out. I screamed and yelled at them for making fun of me because I was crying because somebody died. And in the movie, the father was crying. And I was furious. And my dad came in, actually, scolded Ricky, told him to stop laughing. And looking back, I think Ricky was laughing because he didn't want to cry in front of my dad. And my dad apologized and simply said he was raised in an era where men weren't supposed to cry. We were supposed to be there for the woman. And I just said, that's stupid. So you don't think I can be there for you if you cry? Like it was an eye-opening lesson for both of us. But I know that he grew up being taught that if you showed emotion, you were weak. Boys more than girls are often drawn to video games. This is a generalization, but statistically speaking, probably almost twice as many boys are hooked on video games as are girls. You're often told video games and technology is nowhere. Well, that's where you make your money now. Video games, coding, technology, cybersecurity, all of that. Boy, if you're good with a computer, this is a big lie. Dancing is gay. Okay, so what I miss with musical movies is men dancing. You know, Fred Astaire, Ginger Rogers, that was romance, the epitome of romance back in the day. And Fred Astaire was not considered gay because he danced. He was bagging Ginger Rogers. So when you look at Dancing with the Stars and, there's a lot of public support for dance, but I also know Derek, Molly's friend Derek that danced, suffered a lot of bullying as a middle school and high school kid because he danced, tap danced and sang. He was a performer. He's dancing on Broadway now. One of the best scenes in The Great Gatsby is a quartet dance that he's in. And it's amazing, this incredible tap dance. It's ridiculous. When you talk to men who dance, they get a kick out of this because you're surrounded by beautiful women. Like, if you want to meet beautiful women and get to touch them and hold them and hug them and dance with them, take up dance. You're surrounded. But that's a real common one. And I think that holds true still. Ignore the bully and they'll stop bullying you. So that's the opposite of what my dad was told. He was told to go out and finish it. So I think that can be sort of personal. If you care about reading and intellect and what you look like and your clothes, then you must be gay. That's effeminate. So we might call that metrosexual, right? Guys are supposed to be jeans and a flannel shirt. I don't know whose idea that is, but there are lots of different ways that masculinity can be sort of evidenced. I don't know that one is better than the other. Girls are often told that guys only want one thing, sex. And while in general, biologically speaking, men may have a higher sex drive than women or males versus females, any relationship I've ever been in, men want lots more than just sex. They want a lot of things. Men are unfeeling robots. Well, they are told that feelings are not masculine. Girls can do anything a boy can do. Well, no, they can't. Boys need to be able to do everything girls can do. Wait a minute. No, they can't. We're often told as girls and boys that one is better than the other. And quite frankly, there are ways that girls outweigh boys and boys outweigh girls, or males outweigh females and females outweigh males. I don't think either are better. That's a judgment call. You have to let go of your masculinity if you want to be agreeable or flexible or acquiescent in the workplace, that male leaders are strong and they lead my way or the highway. And female leaders are more consultative and group oriented. So those two stereotypes may have truth in them. I always go back to before we had modern life, where we're living in the wild or in the middle of a prairie. You had a man and a woman and a family, because most families were traditional that way then. But if you had a group of people and you had young people and old people, for the most part, the men would be tilling the fields and planting the vegetables and doing all the labor outside of the home, hunting, gathering, and the women would be maintaining the homestead and raising the children and preparing what you brought back for eating and making clothing and such. And it makes sense. That doesn't mean that there weren't sort of two-spirit type people or the occasionally really strong woman or really not so strong man that would stay back and work with the other gender. But that's where that comes from. So a strong male leader would lead, do what I say, this is life or death. And women would say, all right, we have to work together, ladies. We've got 20 kids to take care of. I can see where these stereotypes come from, but we label them. And with the label comes judgment. So why does flexibility have to be a female quality? Why can't flexibility also be a male quality? Or why does it have to have a gender attached to it at all? Men in my father's generation, he was this way as well. We're taught one thing, that you grew up and you had your fun, yes, but your life path was to have a girl, graduate college, have an education, get a girlfriend, get a job, get married, buy a house, have children, earn money, save money, go on vacations, raise your children, retire, enjoy retirement, have a little nest egg to leave to your children. That was a very common, it's like the American dream, so to speak, that you have to work hard your whole life so that you can enjoy retirement, even though you might be so sick by the time you retire, you can't enjoy it. I looked around for some more specific sort of articles on this, and I found an article in Gentleman's Gazette on seven lies men are told, 7 things boys and men are taught to believe. So the first one was a man must be independent and solve his problems alone. I would say that epitomizes my dad quite a bit, and my older brother, quite honestly. Jonathan was much more contemplative and group oriented, and I just think he was born in 1969 instead of 1960, and I think as he grew up, cooperative learning and all those sorts of things came into play. I know that girls tend to do their homework together, not boys. Boys would tend to study on their own. Wealth determines your value. In my episode on women, we were told that our value was by how fat or skinny we were. The smaller we were, the more valuable we were. With men, looks seldom come into play. It's how much money you make, right? Wealth. Men should follow the same life trajectory as like their fathers, as other men. And I just went through that whole step-by-step way you're supposed to live your life. Men should not express emotion. I think sometimes that's still true. I have to work really hard in parenting Jack to let him know that it's okay to cry. Yeah, go ahead and cry. If you feel like crying, cry. That's what you do. I would like to think it's more acceptable in today's generations for boys to cry. I don't think it's bullied and teased as much as it might have been. I think it's not as big of a surprise if it happens. I do think boys are still under a lot of pressure to be strong. Masculinity is defined by physical strength or athletic ability. 5, 6, and 7 are all about how do you define masculinity? Well, physically, you're strong and you have great athletic ability. You're truly a boy. You have this ability. So my dad was able to prove his masculinity that way. Number 6 was masculinity is defined by fame, fortune, intellect, and power. So you notice that again, so physical strength and athletic ability is physical. It's your body, but it's not what it looks like. It doesn't say a big muscly body. It's about what your body can do, not what it looks like. And with women, the feminine definition of these, femininity is not described by athletic ability or physical strength. It's not. It's defined by delicacy. Masculinity is defined by fame, fortune, intellect, and power. I think women get famous for all these things. I don't think it defines femininity. The feminine nature is decidedly one step back, and we can demur. And the last one was masculinity is defined by objectifying women. I've come to learn now that people are afraid of things. And when people are afraid of things, they question them. They try to make them look bad. They make them wrong. They make fun of them or pigeonhole them, right? And I do believe a lot of, quote unquote, the war on women, which is hugely fierce right now, bigger now than it even was, I think, when I was growing up, is because I think people see the innate power that women have. Men are taught that they are more powerful than women. So I found all this interesting. And whenever I'm talking about these things, it's hard not to take them personally. It's hard not to say, all right, I have some commentary on this. I think you're wrong here. I don't know what you're saying. That's great because that starts a conversation. But I do believe that And just watching behavior in young people today, when I'm at school events, when I'm in the CrossFit gym or teaching weightlifting, I look at the insecurities that boys and girls have and how much they want to not feel insecure and how each age levels and boys versus girls all just believe this menu given to them. I don't think all men objectify women, but women are objectified and we're taught to accept it. That's the other piece, is that women are taught very much that it's their job to accept this. We're supposed to support our husbands. We're supposed to take care of everybody. We're naturally nurturing. These are things we're told. In trying to summarize, lies were told in school, lies were told about relationships, lies were told about women, lies were told about men, things we're taught to believe about ourselves, lies that we tell to protect ourselves or whatever. I definitely feel that so much of dishonesty or mistruth comes from a place of fear, a place of wanting to fit in, a place of wanting to be what we're supposed to be, to live up to expectations. And that anyone who doesn't quite fit the mold of their biological sex or of their place in their family spends a lot of time creating a truth in which they feel comfortable living so that they can, be happy and feel like they're successful. I think my dad spent his whole life wanting desperately for someone to pull him into their lap and hug him and tell him he was a good boy. I just think that because he spent his whole life trying to prove that he was. When my abuse stopped and my parents were apart and my dad was quitting drinking and finding God and going to therapy and really just trying to fix himself, he spent hours and hours, years and years, trying to apologize to me and seek my forgiveness. He was also very accepting of the fact that I wasn't just going to give it, that it hurt me too much. I didn't feel like I had a voice or a say in any of my life, even after I had told and all of that. My parents divorced when they were 34 years old. That's so young. And my dad died at 82. So 48 years of living with the reality that he had made a choice that hurt someone so much. 48 years of really every day trying to correct himself and be a better person. And I think in his religious reality, one of the major tenets of the Baha'i faith is equality of women and men, that we each serve an important role and that we should do our best to live up to the role that we are intended to serve. Does that pigeonhole people into only being able to do certain things? No, it doesn't, quite honestly. Nowhere in our religion does it say the dad has to be firm and strong and mean, and the mom has to stay home and raise the kids. It doesn't. It says that parents should take an equal part in that. In the Baha'i faith, it talks a lot about a life work can be with your hands. It doesn't have to be college. I think men are just so conditioned to be successful that they feel they have to go to college or learn a trade or earn money right away. And that earning money is more important than liking the way that you earn the money. My dad loved his work. He was good at it. But I also know that work is work is work. And for his whole adult life, 5 days a week, he went to work. And he had a couple of days on the weekends to not go to work. And then he went back to work. And I think that he spent a lot of his life looking back and feeling bad about it and looking ahead and worrying. And I think we're sort of trained to do that as well. What I notice is that the answers I get, the honest answers I get when I ask young people or people my age or people on Facebook, anywhere, questions like the ones I've just proposed here and answered, the answers, male to female, man to woman, boy to girl, continue to be different in similar ways. I don't know what that means. I know that sitting here 8 days out from my dad's funeral, I feel very much that as the parentified child, calling my mother, going to the nursing home, calling the funeral home, being a part of the funeral arrangements, writing the obituary, publishing the obituary, organizing the funeral, creating a program for the funeral, officiating the funeral, hosting the get-together after the funeral. I did all of those things. I had incredible help. My brothers helped me. My sister helped me. My sister-in-law helped me. My friend Polly helped me. I did not ask my mother to help me. I felt like this was a time that I'm supposed to take care of my mother. As our parents age, we become the parents. It's that circle of life thing. In watching my mother and my father, it's hard not to think about 30, 40 years down the road when this is me. And will it be Gracie? Will it be Jack? Will it be someone else? I don't know. I do know that I am amazed in the process of this podcast how much I learn about myself, how much it opens my eyes and ears to the thought processes of other people, and how much of our lives are controlled by information that is untrue. It's pretty fascinating. If I had anything to learn from this whole experience with my dad, I do know that the process of laying him to rest, of burying the body that I associate with all the horrible abuse, has been incredibly healing and helpful. That dad, whose facial expressions can take me back in an instant to a bad moment, isn't here anymore. And I know that whatever he's doing, wherever he is, he's fixing and coping with what he needs to, and he's enjoying utter happiness and transcendence. And I hope it's every bit as good as he hoped it would be. And it makes it a bit easier for me not only to forgive him, but to forgive my mother, because I hold a lot of anger to her as well, which I think oftentimes is a projection of my own. But I digress. My dad's dead. I'm one parent away from being part of a generation of people my age whose parents are gone. We're becoming the old people. It's an interesting journey. Maybe I should do a whole episode on lies we're told about old people. That'd be great. I miss my dad. I miss the role he would play with my mom. I worry about my mom. But I also have great comfort in the whole process of life. And I don't know what the lies are in there. I do know that some things I believe are just based on faith. Another major tenet of the Baha'i faith is independent investigation of the truth. That if you have a question, read everything you can to find answers. Research. My podcast editor often says research is his love language. It should be all of our love languages. We shouldn't ever accept something we hear as fact. If we hear something, we should seek out as many answers to that fact as possible and find truth in what we read and write and find in our journeys. So looking forward, I'm going to do an episode on lies we're told about the food we eat. I'm going to do an episode on lies we're told about medication, big pharma, that sort of thing. I'm going to do sort of lies we're told about money and poverty. That'll be an interesting one. It will pull into play a lot of different things, but it's sort of lies we're told that maintain kind of a class system, the middle class, the lower class, the upper class, how we maintain those things culturally to keep everyone in their place. Because isn't that what's going on after all? Anyway, if you have any other ideas about lies and ways that lies fit into our lives, I'd love to hear them. This has been a lot of fun. As I end this episode, rest in peace, Daddy. Hope everything's good for you up there. Thank you to everyone that was super kind to me all week. I haven't worked out in a week, and I've eaten a ton of junk food. Tomorrow will be my official end of the morning, MOURNING season. Be good to yourself. Be honest with yourself. Look in the mirror. Be good to someone else. Lie to them. Tell them they look great in those jeans. And as always, have a good day, everybody.
Hey, thanks for listening and supporting the podcast. Feel free to leave a review and share my stories with your friends. Please reach out with your own stories, as I love connecting with my listeners. If you would like to get to know Molly, head over to mollybfoundation.org to see what she is all about. If you want to see what I'm up to next, you can find me on Instagram at barb_444, on Facebook as Barb Higgins, and at my website, 1000tinysteps.com. And while you're there, sign up for my newsletter, a weekly way to find out what's up in the life of Barb Higgins.